So, this video or talk or whatever is going to be about the economic application of the movement. So, the movement itself consists of three, what would you call it? Types or branches. So, I guess branches would probably be the best word. So there's three branches to the movement. Just like everything in the theory, there's three of everything. There's a subjective, relative, and objective rendering. And I wonder about this idea. I'll probably have to table this for now, unless I want to totally switch topics, because this is its own topic, are those three branches of subjectivity, well, actually, I would say the branches of the movement are reflective of the fields of subjectivity, relativity, and objectivity. There's a subjective field, the field of subjectivity, that's for art and subjective stuff. And the field of relativity is for philosophy, logic, math, methodology, and transformation. And then the field of objectivity is manifestation, actualization, etc. So those fields are actually dimensions, and those dimensions have to deal with reference. The number of reference that they have defines the dimensional number that they are. And those are just the first three. The zeroth dimension has one referent, and that's the subject. So the subject, or some kind of a subjective value, focus, a subjective focus. The referent is subjective, in other words, because there's just one of them, and that's what makes it subjective. That's what gives the entire field of subjectivity, or the zeroth dimension, because it's the same thing, its style, its flavor, its categorical pattern. What's endemic to subjectivity is endemic to a singular referent, so that there is no other referent. There's just that one referent. That's why I can't get another person to feel what I feel, but I can get them to relate. But by the time I get them to relate, I've had to translate that information from a raw feeling into a representation. Words describe, right? So, for example, the word anger, right, is not the feeling of anger. It's just a representation of it. I can say that word to someone, but the way that they take it is going to have their own subjective spin or vibe to it. There are some people, if you say the word anger, they're going to think about school shootings because they're like really fucking extreme. And then there's other people you say anger to, and then it's just like, well, mild irritation, kind of like when a mosquito bites you. And those aren't the same emotion, but that's the vast difference between subjectivity and relativity. By the time that I render something into relativity and I get someone to relate to it or not, then they don't have the raw subjective referent that I do. It's been kind of altered during the translation of it into relativity. And in some ways, it's also made more complex. If I were able, for example, to isolate a raw subjective state, and I could relate it so well that other people would know exactly what that feels like. Even if I could do that, it still wouldn't be the raw emotion itself, in and of itself. It would be rendered with this sort of tail on it that is the relation, the word, the symbolization, the set of relative definitions and things that are defining that subjective referent. So basically, the field of relativity is kind of surrounding that that referent just beyond itself, giving it contextual value, so that the content is subjective, but the context is relative, and then the setting in which it's being rendered is objective, meaning like the format, the forum, the platform, if it's a website, if it's a book, the medium that is being used to symbolize the relative definitions of that subjective referent. So you can get more and more and more complex, and you can extend or branch it out, or whatever word you want to use. I like the word extend, the subjective referent into relativity, objectivity, and so on. So that is sort of a preface of this movement also, because the movement is defined by the theory of Deus Ex Machina, at least, if not lucidity. I try not to use lucidity as much as I can, because lucidity is the religious version of Deus Ex Machina. And so because the movement is justified by its relation to either the theory of Deus Ex Machina or the religion of lucidity, then I have to talk about those also if I'm going to talk about the movement and its branches. So those branches that I was going to get to are analogous to the first three dimensions that I had mentioned. The zeroth dimension of subjectivity is analogous to sociocultural branch of the movement, which is just how people treat each other. It could have, religion in it, but it's not specifically religious. It's just allowing of religion. So you could have whatever religion you want, but the religion isn't expected to be considered in terms of like law or legality or even logical philosophy if they don't want to extend it into that area. It could just be Kierkegaardian raw passion, which I don't prefer. It's not my style, but that's somebody else's. That's fine. I don't care about that. So the movement doesn't have any inherent religiosity to it. I really try to make sure that it doesn't inherit my prejudices from the religion of lucidity. So I'm trying to stop working on that religion, actually. But I am religious myself, or spiritual myself, and so I tend to make the theory that I'm working on into a religious thing, and it isn't. The movement itself should be relativistic, and it shouldn't, because if it's subjective, if I make it subjective, then it's basically an extension of me, and then I end up being like a dictator imposing my will upon people and collecting them and saying, hey, join me, and then the whole thing becomes a personality cult, and it sort of becomes like kind of like what Hitler did or Stalin did, or especially what North Korea did. The North Koreans, actually, that country is a great example of what I don't want the movement to be. So I really try hard not to do that. And that happens when the theory is reduced to just whatever the leader says. It's just whatever the leader says, because then it's arbitrary. So the whole point of the movement was to not be arbitrary. It was to make it so that it was logical, rational, and able for anybody to approach it and logically, rationally deal with it, not be swayed by emotions at all. And then the emotions, of course, they're going to be emotions, but those are a byproduct after the digestion of the theory itself, not a prerequisite for it. So the problem with North Korea, the way that I would contrast my movement would be like, North Korea is the antithesis. That's as far from what I want as you can get. It's arbitrary, makes no sense. And the shit just comes up whenever he feels like saying it. If Kim Jong-un decides tomorrow that he wants to ban Cheerios, it's done. There's no way to predict it. It could be anything. He could do anything, and no one knows what it's going to be. So that's what I mean when I say arbitrary. I hate that. I can't stand it, because then how is the population ever going to figure out what it is to be a North Korean if that changes every other fucking week, and it changes depending on some some random dude that just happened to be born into power. He didn't earn it. It's not like he's put himself in that position by selecting himself. He was put in the position simply by his birth. And so that's arbitrary. It's unjustified. It's unjustifiable. You can't justify it. I mean, you can believe in it, you can accept it, but you can't justify that. Well, I want a movement that is justified. And so my movement is going to be where it lets people be free instead of them being, told you get to do this or you don't get to do that. It's allowing people. And the number one thing about the movement is that you can always leave at no cost. I want the movement to be something that is empowering people. And the way that I can do that is simply by leaving the door open, both to come in and to leave, and never get in the way of somebody who wants to leave. If they're leaving, it's a problem on my end. There's something I need to fix, not the other person. So that's why it's so important to me that the justification for the movement is not subjective. And the religion of lucidity is subjective. That's how I relate to God, but it's still subjective because I've formed an image of God, which is a subjective referent, and then I'm deriving everything from it. The difference being that Deus Ex Machina derives its justification from the assumption, because every theory has an assumption, the assumption that there is such a thing as modality. And it's centered on that, on modality. And modality is the field of all possibilities. It's not a referent. It's what makes reference exist. It's what makes reference and reference frames and referrers who refer to the referent inside of the reference frame. Those three are separate, and they're defined by modality. The field of modality, the field of all possibilities. And what makes them exist is that they have possibility to exist, and there's nothing that makes them impossible to exist, and they are convergent. So the referrer, the observer, the one who is observing or referring to the referent via the reference frame, is the only arbitrary feature in the theory. And that's how it should be. The person should bring their own arbitration into the theory, not have that arbitration imposed upon them. And that's really the essence of what makes this movement a free movement versus the North Korean, I don't even know what to call that, system, as a closed system that doesn't allow change, doesn't allow people to leave. That's my biggest gripe against it, honestly. It could do whatever it wants as long as it lets people leave. Because it's a large-scale example of a small-scale common sense problem. If I can't leave a fucking room, I'm a prisoner. That's the definition of being in a prison, is that you cannot leave. If you make a room a prison by locking the door and locking the person inside it where they can't unlock it, they can't escape, they can't get out, that's a prison. I don't care if it's a country. I don't care if it's a room. I don't care if it's a universe. I don't believe in closed areas like that. I don't believe in closing people in. And I know this is religious, but this is why I believe that all systems should be open ultimately. At their periphery should be open. There should be an openness at the end, not a closed system where you say everything that exists inside this and everything that doesn't exist exists outside it, and it's a sharp, hard line. You'll never find it. I mean, we've got, like, in physics, for example, there's the Planck length and stuff like that. But that's not a measurement of how small something can be. That's a measurement of how small something can be measured. So there's a huge difference there. And we know that because whatever the components of that Planck length are, and there must be something that's smaller than a Planck length in order to compose and cause that Planck length to be legitimate. It has a beginning and an end. It's not zero. It's not nothing. It has a non-zero extension, and that full extension has a beginning and an end. And what composes that beginning cannot be the same thing as what composes the end because it has to be non-zero. So it's origin and its terminus have to be distinct. And that separation, that distinction, is what defines relativity and our ability to discern something from something it is not. So, all of that being said, this movement that I'm trying to make is really about making sure that everything stays open at the periphery. So, for example, there's always an open door to enter and exit at will for any arbitrary reason. The only arbitration in the system should be why you came in and why you came out. And that's it. That's the total extent of where the arbitration begins and ends. It should be kept inside each individual person as a subject, because that's, again, justified by the theory. Because then there's just that one referent of what the person themselves, the subject themselves, renders as their referent, which is necessarily arbitrary, because you can't rationalize. As Kierkegaard rightly pointed out, the reason that someone believes what they believe cannot ever be rendered to a logical reason, because logic doesn't favor any particular mode of belief structure over another. Logic can never tell you who to fall in love with or which religion to follow or what you should be when you grow up. It can't tell you those things. It can only tell you how you can. Once you've made your decision, then you can learn how to do that. But it won't ever tell you how to make that distinction itself. It's only ever going to be something that shows you how to make that happen once you've made your choice. But the choice itself is arbitrary. You can make whichever choice you want. What you want to be when you grow up, you'll rationalize later after you've made your decision. You'll say, well, it's rational that I did this because blah, blah, blah. But you'll only do that after the fact. The reasoning that you apply is always retroactive. The decision that you make is actually arbitrary and usually emotional. It resonates with you as a subject. And that's exactly the way that it should be. So one of the things about the movement that I've also tried to do is to make it so that every person is free to choose whichever side that they wish, because there's always two sides to every coin. Well, then the system should reflect that. It shouldn't tell you which side of the coin is, quote unquote, the best side. It should treat each of those sides equally and not favor or disfavor either of them. So the way that the movement is built has those three branches, and it cuts off at that point, but it leaves it open for it to grow into more complexity later. It just establishes the first three branches of subjectivity, the branches being sociocultural, economic, and political. So the economy should be rational. Everyone has already at least unconsciously understood this, because the economy is wholly within the realm of relativity, not subjectivity and not objectivity. And there's people that will throw their hands up in the air and go, what? That's madness, blah, blah, blah. What does that even mean? The reason that economies are always rational is because the buying and selling of something is always rational. It's never arbitrary. Now, the person has their intuition and their desire for something, and they place their own subjective value in something over another. Like in the barter system, somebody might value someone else's goats, but not value their own chickens because they have too many chickens themselves, so they don't value them as much because they have too much supply. And they don't have enough goats, so they value goats more than chickens because they have more chickens and less goats. And so that's rational. Now, as to why the person might particularly like one style or version or brand or flavor or whatever, a species of goat over another, that's obviously arbitrary. But once that decision has been made, the actual act of economizing, the actual act of exchange, economic exchange, is and must always be rational, never arbitrary. For example, if, let's say, a prostitute offers somebody a hand job for $10, they can't turn around and offer it for $5 to the next guy. Why? Because that's not fair. Why is that not fair? Because it isn't rational. It's just done because the value of supply and demand might change depending on the customer, or because one of them is going to be richer than the other one. So they will make that decision, for what they personally consider to be rational reasons, but they aren't, because they're only subjective, because ultimately they're only justified by the self, the prostitute themselves, valuing that money, not the exchange. In order for an exchange to occur, both the parties of the exchange have to be treated as equals because they are exchanging something that's an equality of value inside of the exchange. Now, obviously, each of those people are going to have an imbalance of their value because the exchange wouldn't happen otherwise. People would just already be happy with what they've got and they wouldn't bother exchanging it. But during the exchange itself is always equal and rational. And no one will ever listen to this, and no one will ever believe this, and yet they'll always be doing it, even though they don't recognize that they're doing it, even though they're not aware of themselves doing it, even though they're absolutely adamant to the point that God himself could not convince them that it is this way. It is this way. The reason that somebody exchanges something for something else is because of their own subjective arbitrary value system. But the reason that the exchange happens at all is because the exchange itself is not arbitrary. If you went up to a barter person that's bartering something, and the exchange itself were arbitrary and subjective, then you'd have no way of predicting how the exchange was going to go. And even after you finalized on it, even after you've hawked it down or whatever and haggled it down to whatever price is reasonable and agreed upon by you, the agreement itself renders the exchange to be equal. The rendering of the exchange as being equal during the exchange is what makes it logical, rational, and relativistic during the exchange after the exchange has been finalized, during the finalization of the exchange itself. The contract as it's being created might not be rational, which is what most people are thinking about when I say that. They're thinking of creating the contract or coming to an agreement, but not having yet reached one. So they'll go to somebody and they'll say, I think this should cost this much. And they'll say, well, I think it should cost that much. And eventually they'll converge on some equal number. One person says X, the other person says X. They both say X, and then they do that exchange. They actually provide whatever it is in exchange for whatever's being sold. And the buying equals the selling. What is bought is equal to what is sold. That's the equality. That's the natural, inherent relativism of the economy. So that's why, for example, corporations always choose the most profitable outcome, even though the people, including the CEOs and the board of directors that are supposedly in charge of the corporation, are against that. Maybe they don't think that profitable move should be made because it's polluting or it's starving kids or it's enabling a sweatshop or something like that. But the corporation itself doesn't care. The economy doesn't care. It's just going to keep on being rational. It doesn't care if you're a Muslim. It doesn't care if you're a Jew. It doesn't care if you're black, white, fat, poor, rich. Doesn't care. It treats everybody as exactly interchangeable. It's another reason that the economy is relativistic and not subjective. Now, again, the reason that somebody might choose to approach an exchange, or the reason that someone might value having already made the exchange in the past, are both going to be outside the realms of relativity, which is why most people will never agree with what I'm saying here, because they'll only ever think of what happened before the exchange and what happened after the exchange, and they'll never think about the split instant of the exchange happening itself, which is, of course, the only economic part of the exchange. Everything leading up to that is advertising, which is subjective and blah, 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 and arbitrary. I just so happened to be on the street and this person did that and that's arbitrary. Yeah, all of it is arbitrary all the way up until you exchange the 25 cents for the lemonade, because you say the lemonade costs 25 cents and they say the lemonade costs 25 cents. And you give them 25 cents and they give you a lemonade and they're both equal. The 25 cents is worth the same thing as the lemonade. If you've got one, then you've got the other as exchangeable, as potentially interchangeable. So that's what makes money work. It's not like I value gold more than you do, so my coins are worth more than yours. They're equally valuable, regardless of whether or not I like it or not. I don't even have to like the money itself for it to have value. I don't subjectively give the money its value. The money has its value because of its equal exchange rate with other people, with other things, and that creates a system. And that means that, I can reasonably estimate how much a cow costs, or how much a gallon of milk costs, or how much a barrel of wheat costs. It costs the same as the other cows that are in the locality, the other milk that's being sold in that area, the other wheat that's being sold in that local area. And that's what's going to determine the market, which then determines the price, etc. All of it is rational. The only time it becomes irrational is when the customer is coming up to the exchange or leaving from the exchange. The exchange itself is always rational. The reasons why someone does it vary, but the exchange itself is always rational. So that's the economic version that has to do with the two reference system, or the first dimension, and it's linear. And it's linear because you've got a buying direction and you've got a selling direction, but that's on the same line. So that when the exchange occurs, you have a linear progression from the seller to the buyer in exchange for whatever amount of money that costs. So after that branch is the objective branch. That's the three reference system, which is actually two-dimensional, not three-dimensional. It's two-dimensional. So that's space, or a hologram, or whatever you want to call it, an abstraction, an abstract arrangement of relations. So if you were to look at both the buying and selling simultaneously in the same space, then you would have an objective rendering of the data of the exchange, which is where another half of the people that disagreed with me earlier were standing. Oh, that's objective, but that's not the exchange. That's the data about a past exchange that's already occurred. So during the exchange, it's a relativistic act. After the exchange has occurred, the data about that is objective. And that's rendered in 2 dimensions, and it has 3 reference. Those branches are inside of those fields. Those branches are kind of like, if you were to think of the movement as a person, kind of an inhabitant in that environment. So it's trying to navigate through that environment. And admittedly, it's going to be anthropomorphized, and it's going to be Terran, in relation to the Earth, because that's where we live. But when we get off of this planet, then the movement will shift, and it will become something that's reflective more about humanity and less about the Earth itself, but just focused on humanity in general. And then after humanity starts to evolve more and we get better technology, it will become post-human, and it will hopefully at that point be broadened to any living being. It could be part of the movement at that point. So those will be its 3 evolutionary eras, I guess you would call it. The movement itself, though, like I said, has those 3 branches, and I cut it off there, even though, I just got done saying that I always leave the periphery open. I cut it off there to make it graspable, that it's small enough that you can fit it in your hand, you know what it is, you can exchange it with other people, you can transmit it, you can render it, you can make sense of it in your head, hopefully. And there's a way of arranging it so that you can be objective about its relation to other things. It's just enough to get it started. But then after that, it looks forward beyond itself, and it says it's not going to say that those 3 branches are the end-all be-all of existence. It's just saying that those 3 constitute the core of the movement, the soul of it. When you start extending it beyond that, then you're getting into territory that's going to be so broad that there's going to be some individuals that it may never reach, namely native humans, that don't ever evolve, that basically are passive enough that they just want to be workers, and they don't have any aspirations of being a manager or a CEO or a politician or serve in any official capacity or tell anybody what to do or be in charge of anything. They just sort of, benefit from the system, and they contribute too, of course, but they don't take the reins on themselves. And I think that that's fine. I don't think that people should be punished for that. I don't think that we should force them to all end up being managers and CEOs and all of that stuff. But if someone wants to do that, then I also don't think they should be forced not to. So it provides everybody, but mainly the base of the population, a common platform that everybody can understand, that's simple enough that everybody can involve themselves in it, and then it can grow from there. But it's not meant to be any smaller than it is. It can never be reduced from the 3 branches, for example, into 2 or 1 branch or no branches. It definitely has at least 3 branches, and then it can add more branches in the future. So that part is left open. I don't define it on purpose, just so that people can eventually congregate and assemble that whenever they feel like that in the future, because it's not necessary. It's just the 3 that are necessary. If you don't have 3, then you run out of choices very quickly. Things end up becoming unjustifiable very quickly, and you end up with slavery, you end up with silencing and censorship and programming and propaganda and all this other stuff. When you have the 3 branches, then they all check each other equally. You've got a healthy economy because it's being checked by the political branch. It's being checked by the Justice Department. It's not able to run rampant, but it's still simple enough that you can understand it. It's something that you can really grasp because it hasn't been made so utterly incomprehensibly complex that you just don't bother measuring it anymore, which is why I don't bother defining anything beyond the political, which is analogous to and within the objective field or 3 referential system or second dimension. So none of that stuff is going to make any sense until way later. That's why I'm even making these. I'm not making these for right now. I'm not making these for 2026. I'm not even making these for 2030, which is when the revolution is supposed to begin officially. I am making these for, I would say, somewhere in the vicinity of about 100 years in the future. If I'm successful, 100 years in the future, for people to, comb through old historical records and archives and data and stuff like that, and try to piece together, who am I, what are my intentions and all that stuff, because I'll be dead. So this kind of gives people a little bit of a view into my life. And I think it works better than keeping a journal because it's digital and I won't lose it. I lost all my other journals. I used to have a bunch, but I guess I kind of use this as my journal now because I can't lose it. It's always on the internet. Provided, of course, YouTube doesn't screw up my channel for getting no views consistently every single time. But as long as they don't get rid of my videos, then they'll still be up there. And eventually I'll, copy them over to my own website and they'll be archived in some dusty basement area that no one ever goes into. Except for, like I said, in about 100 years, hopefully there will be some archaeological people that are interested in it just simply because, hey, I want to know more about who, this guy is as a person, just because it's a interesting topic, not because we have to know, but just because it's kind of fun, and you can really peer more deeply into who I am that way than if I were to write it into a journal. Although I used to prefer writing it. This is a little bit better because my thoughts are still being poured out into the world, but they're being poured out in my voice. So you can actually hear my tone. And I think that kind of enriches it a little bit more. So that is what I hope will happen with the movement. After the revolution has been established, after we're successful, after that, then people can start to explore. And then they'll be like, okay, now we're not in survival mode anymore. Now we can get a little bit more complex. Let's try extending into the, what would that be? The 3rd dimension and the 4th dimension, the 5th dimension, using 4, 5, and 6 referent systems respectively. And merely extending things. The analogy being that I used to use paper and pen to write my thoughts on a journal, and now I'm making auditory talks and rendering it through my voice. It's still words, it's still the same words, but the medium has changed. And so the data itself is more complex. My tone, my voice, my cadence, my speech pattern, etc., is all renderable in this medium versus in the journal where it isn't, or my accent doesn't get picked up, etc. So that difference means that it's still the same thoughts, it's still the same person, it's still the same stuff. It's just that the way that you get to look at it is more enriched. The movement will still have the same three branches, still have the sociocultural, economic, and political branches, but there will also be whatever comes after politics, and so on and so on, for infinity. It doesn't have an end. It just keeps going. So that's one of the things about this movement that's really cool, is that the revolutionary spirit of it can be kept alive literally forever. And it never runs out of steam. It never runs out of problems to solve. It never runs out of areas to explore. It's very hungry for exploration. And I think that's good because it feeds our sense of purpose. And as humans, I think that we are explorers, or at least I feel like I am. We crave novelty. We crave something new. We are imprisoned by normalcy. And so I think that that's what would be really cool. That's my hope for these videos to be used for, is that people will try to piece that together. You know, like, well, what is that? What is this thing that's beyond politics? And I'm hoping that I can even explicitly state what those systems and fields and branches would then be. There's enough information, I feel. I don't know because I can't remember everything I've said, but I feel like I've left enough information so far that a smart person, a smart group of people, could piece together what that is. But if not, hopefully in the future, I'll be able to put that into these also. The purpose of this video, the scope of it, oh, that reminds me. So when is something completed? Well, it's completed when you have a distinct, objectively definable origin and terminus. And that will render it up to the complexity of the second dimension, three referential objective system. And I like to call those objects of knowledge because they act like a physical object because you can predict them 100%. And you know them inside and out. You can tell me what the composition is. You can tell me what the percentage is. You can tell me how those are arranged. You can tell me exactly how to create it to the extent that you could replicate it yourself. So replication is definitely part of it. If you can't replicate it, then it isn't a system, or at least it isn't a viable system. And it certainly isn't an object of knowledge. So the reason that I would say that is because if you talk to somebody and they say, well, this is a point of knowledge, this is an object of knowledge, and then you say, I don't know what that is, and I can't render it. So is that my fault or your fault? And you'll never know unless that other person is able to render it in a way that at least some other independent person can replicate that themselves. And that's why you go to somebody else and you ask them, what do you think? That's what we're doing there. It's a natural process. We're naturally evolved to want to ask another third person. I need a second opinion here. What does this mean? And that's what you're doing. You're talking to somebody that's independent, that isn't their friend and isn't their enemy, isn't related to them in any way. They're independent. They're just some other person. And they come to their own conclusion, and then you feel a lot better if those opinions converge. If they diverge, then you have to get yet another opinion until you get a tiebreaker so that you can figure out, well, is the majority of people in agreement or not? It's a heuristic, but it is useful, and we use that all the time. The reason that it's a heuristic and it isn't an algorithm, or it isn't a logically valid way of rendering the truth value of something, is because we can't be certain about which one is telling the truth and which one isn't just based off of popularity alone. Because at one point in the past, the most popular opinion was that the earth was flat, and we now know that that's not the case. And there's a whole bunch of other things too that are like that, but you only need one. So this movement is going to have those three branches: cultural branches, economic branches, and political branches. The thing that I just realized is that I can actually, I call it automate my job as a janitor, because I work as a janitor over at the Fox News building. And Jim, my boss, well, the owner of the business, Service Made Industries, that I work for is Jim. And then Rusty's my supervisor. He works just beneath Jim, and then I work just beneath Rusty. Jim was talking to me about Rusty's getting burnt out, and he doesn't really know what is going to happen with the business. And I felt kind of bad. And I said, Jim, I could try to take Rusty's position, because I think that's what he wanted for me, or at least for someone, not me specifically, but he wanted that for someone, is to take over Rusty's position. But, he's getting old, man. He's 70 something, Jim is. And so is Rusty. Rusty's in his 60s, I think. And Jim is in his 70s. So I don't see this system going on too much for his business going on too much further. So I was thinking about this, and I was like, well, I'm probably going to go and do my own thing anyway. And this has happened before, where I was going to take a security job position, but then I decided against it too. And it was for the same reasons, because I already have a plan. I want to have my own pot farm. And that's how I'm going to get this movement started financially, is I'm going to have a pot farm. And it's going to be a libertarian movement. And I don't think there's anything that I can think of that would be more libertarian than a pot farm. I mean, think about it. That's like the most libertarian thing that there is. It fits so nicely into everything that I want my movement to be. Pot is like a fucking outstanding, I wouldn't say perfect, but it's outstanding referent for my movement. It's a great representative of the movement. It's misunderstood. It has great medical benefits that most people don't realize. But, as it starts to get more well-known, people accept it more because they realize that it's not addictive. It doesn't keep you chained to it. You don't have to do it. If you start doing it, you don't have to continue doing it. You don't need it. It's not a survival thing. But if you do have it, it makes life better for most of us. There's different types. There's the CBD and there's the THC, right? And they have different effects on you. And so there's a lot of analogies there that I really like. I like the culture, the vibe of it. It's like, it's not straight-laced. It's not a three-piece suit. It's not a capitalist fucking thing. It's kind of the people that smoke pot, right? We're humble people, man. We're not like we're not. A pothead is not going to be a dictator. It's hippy dippy. It's cool, but it's not necessarily hippy dippy. It could also be it. It allows that, but it doesn't have to be that either. It's not constrained only by that. But it does kind of kick out the straight-laced types of people. So, a pot farm is, it's going to make the Mormons blush. Oh, wow. Oh, my God. Really? You're going to sell drugs? It might not impress my grandma, but my dad would think it was pretty cool. My mom probably wouldn't care too much. My kids will think it's great. Wow, go dad. Yeah, sell pot. This is cool. Because it's not addictive. I'm not Scarface, But it's a little edgy, but it's not too edgy. It's perfect. I fucking love it. So I'm going to do that. And I told Jim some of that. I was like, I've got this plan of owning a pot farm. So I'm probably not going to be the one that takes over your business. But, if you need me to, I can. But it's not my first option. It's not my ideal. So, and I thought about it, and he wants me to come up with this list of duties for the job, right? And he said, well, I need you to come up with this list so that you've got an exact understanding of what your job entails and you don't forget things. Because he's still under the impression that I'm forgetting things. He didn't say anything in specific. Rusty told me that I'm not missing anything anymore. Although when I do occasionally miss something, he does bring it up, but it's rarer, and that's a good sign to me. So I think Jim is just in general feeling anxious about the business, which again, like I said, I understand. He's burnt out on it because all this stupid shit keeps happening. People keep dropping off like flies. And I told Rusty this, because I'm closer to Rusty than I am Jim. I told Rusty the reason that these people keep dropping off is because they can't make enough money to pay the bills. I barely make enough to put food in my mouth. I only have $300 to spare every month. That's not enough. It's barely enough to survive on, yeah, but it's not enough to go anywhere with. And there's really no career advancement, because if I got up to Rusty's level, I'd have to kick him out of it. So I got to wait for him to leave to even take his place. And that's still just an entry level paying job. It's just a full-time paying job. It's like $3,000 a month, maybe something like that, which is the same thing that I'd be making as an entry level person in a pot shop, except I don't have the license and I don't have the experience, because I'm using all my time to manage this business that I don't really care about, So I was telling Rusty, the reason these people keep dropping off is because it's a part-time job. They only work for 4 hours a day, and there's no other buildings, because ServiceMaid only services this one building anymore. There's not like a van that's going to pick us up at the end of the shift and go ship us off to some other building, and then we finish our full-time job like a full legit company. This is just part-time. You spend 4 hours at the building at Fox, and then you go home and you get paid $2,000 a month, and it's barely enough to pay for the rent and groceries, and that's it. And you don't have enough. If you wanted a car, you wouldn't be able to afford it. You can't live like that, and so you're going to end up with people that just leave all the time, because as soon as they get an opportunity to get a full-time job, they'll jump right the fuck out of this boat and go into that one. Why would anybody want to stay here? The only people that are ever going to fill this position are people that are coming up from homelessness, which is what I did. So I needed this job. Or people that are at Rusty's side, where they're looking for something to, really easy, that's just going to supplement their retirement. And those are the only two people you're going to get. You're going to get really old people, and you're going to get really young people, but you're not going to get the right kind of people. You're going to get people that are just coming up and people that are just getting out of the system, of the economic marketplace of work in general. People that are just beginning to work and people that are just ending their work. But you're not going to get people that are, career workers that want a full-time job, because it's not a full-time job. So consequently, Rusty's getting burnt out because he has to train somebody every month. He has to train a new person, and he has to go through the entire thing, and he has to show them the card, and he has to show them all the duties, and then he has to train them. He has to look over their shoulder, make sure that everything that they're doing is okay. He can't ever trust the person to just get it done, because it's always a new guy, because they don't want to stick around, because the job is only part-time and there's no full-time positions available. It's a tiny little company. It only has like 4 people in it. So that's why they keep leaving. So it's like, okay, I'm looking at this all and I'm saying to myself, I don't see a future in this company, unless it expands. Because if it's just this one building, it won't ever have full-time positions available for people. And I don't know of any place that has a part-time supervisor. That's just a weird system to have. It's very awkward. It's very weird to run that. If there was at least one other building, let's say we had 2 Fox buildings, if we doubled our work, then yes, it would be barely enough to keep afloat. But as it stands, it's not. And it's just going to go under. So I thought about this and I thought, what I could do is I could automate this and I could turn it into when I was in the military, we used to have what were called SOP, standard operating procedures. And it was the most Barney ass fucking shit that I've ever seen. It's like, click the left mouse button, type these exact letters, hit enter. And these were separate steps. It's like hit enter was one step. It's like the tiniest little step that you could ever do. And every single tiny little micromanaged step was in there. And it kind of made me laugh, but at the same time, it was effective, because it's like, you don't even have to know how to use a computer. You don't have to know how to do anything, because the SOP will teach you exactly how to operate this thing, even if you don't know what you're doing. So I liked that, because it made it so that everybody could do it. Whether you were somebody that had never touched a computer before in your life, or somebody that was very well versed in it, you would equally be able to do the same job with this SOP, because it was so micro managed. But at the same time, it was extremely constricting, because it was so micromanaged that I couldn't express myself. I couldn't skip any unnecessary steps that I found shortcuts to. I couldn't change the SOP because I didn't have the rank to do it. So it was constricting to me while I was doing it, but I never forgot the usefulness of it. And I thought, okay, what if I made an SOP for my job that would replace Rusty's training with this SOP, because they don't have to know how to clean the toilet. It will tell them how to clean it. And it will tell them when to replace the toilet paper, when not to replace it and leave it in the dispenser, when to replace the supplies and tell Jim that we're out of toilet paper when we reach this point. All that stuff will be in there. So you don't have to tell them a word. You could literally hand them this handbook, this SOP, and it would tell them exactly how to do their job. And then as part of it, you could even have them upload a picture of what they've done so far at their job, step by step, so that you don't even have to physically be there to supervise them. They're just sending you a picture, and then you're reviewing it, and you're making sure that they got it done right. And then you can tell them, hey, you missed a spot here, or great job, you got it, or whatever it is. And then as they get better, then you don't have to check in so much, and you can have them just send you a picture at the end of the day. Or you could even just tell them, yes, I finished everything. And, if you wanted to trust them with that after they've worked there for a while, you could do that. And it would make the job a lot easier. So I thought about that. And I thought, well, if I could do that, I could replace not just Rusty, but I could replace Jim. And I could replace everybody with this SOP, because the SOP, I realized, is the one that's making all the decisions. And the people are just enforcing it. And I thought, well, in that sense, everybody then becomes an extension of that SOP, and the SOP is the one that's actually doing, the leg. It's not doing the leg work. It's doing the thought work. It's doing all the decision making work, and then the workers do the leg work. The workers actually execute the functions that the SOP's already decided that they should do, and so you don't have a supervisor. You have this SOP that tells you how to do your job. And then you upload pictures of you having done your tasks for the day to an evaluator. And that evaluator then basically just checks the pictures that you sent versus the pictures in the SOP. If they match, you succeeded. If they don't match, you have to redo it. And it's that simple. So then I thought, well, if that's the only thing that human is doing, is just identifying whether the pictures are matching, that's an entry-level job. That's not a managerial job. That's an entry-level job, because all you have to do is match the pictures. That's it, as the evaluator. And I thought, okay, well, if I did that, then there wouldn't be managers. There would just be this SOP, and there'd be an entry-level evaluator, and there'd be an entry-level worker. And those would be the only people that were actually employed. There would be no managers. And I thought, that's a cool system. The reason that that's cool is because it's infinitely stackable. If I did that, I would automate my own decision-making part of the job it would be automatic, which means I put zero effort in. If I put zero effort in, then I can have an infinite number of these running simultaneously, all feeding me that money that they generate, right? For having already made all these decisions, and I having made all these decisions already through the SOP, then recuperate the capital profits from having sold their services to whoever it is that I sold it to the contract holder of that building. So that I take all the excess and then I pay them the overhead cost. And I can stack that thousands, millions of times, all running concurrently without me ever having to check any of them, because they're all self-managed systems. All those systems run independently of me. So then I can make an infinite amount of profit, because I'm not physically required to be present to be making these decisions. The decisions are already being made automatically. And I thought that idea of automating all decisions in the company would streamline it so well that there would not be overhead beyond what most people would consider to be overhead. The paying of the workers, the paying of the materials, and the paying of the legal fees and all the other administrative stuff that you got, the taxes and blah, blah, the insurance, health insurance for the workers, blah, 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 all that stuff. And that's it. And you wouldn't have a stack of departmental heads and all this stuff. It would just be all leveled out at the evaluator level. for anybody that is doing that part of the job. And the decisions themselves would always be made by the book instead of by people. So now, if the book is obsolete, let's say it needs to change, that's also in the book, is to mutate the book and make it evolve, just like an amoeba or a virus. If it mutates randomly, and this is a feature of the system, it randomly mutates by randomly experimenting. It just lets the worker do something different. Whatever, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's not the same thing as what's already been done. And then you check the results of this experimental method versus the previous institution of whatever the SOP had said in the past. And you check to see which one's better. Was it better in the past, or is it better in the future? If it's better in the past, you keep it, and then you do another experiment. If it's better in the future, you keep the future one and keep that running for long enough to establish that it stays good enough to keep. And then you just keep doing more experiments so that when that also becomes obsolete, you can replace it fluidly. You don't have to have any kind of policy changes or any board meetings or anything like that, because the SOP has that built into it also. So everybody then is rendered at the entry-level position. There are no managers, and I make all the money because all the decisions throughout everything else in the company is all been made. And the book itself never becomes obsolete because it always mutates, because it allows the workers to experiment on the job after they've established their reliability as a good worker that does things by the book. If they do things by the book long enough and they're reliable and they're accurate, then we give them a little bit extra. We promote them up to, it's not necessarily a manager position, but it's above the worker position. It would be considered a leadership position in some sense, but not a conventional manager, because they're not giving orders. They're just experimenting with things in order to try to optimize the workers to their best that they can be. So they are in a leadership position, but they're not managing. And managing and leadership are different, because managing is like micromanaging. Well, you have to do it this way. And it includes discipline, stuff like that. The leaders don't discipline. The evaluators discipline. The evaluators are disciplining people based off of whether or not the pictures match what the book says it should be and what it is. If what it is matches the book, it's a success. If it doesn't, it's not. And that's it. And so there's not really a discipline in the sense of wagging your finger in someone's face and saying, you are a terrible person for this reason, or whatever it is. It's just an automatic, verification. And it just tells you, did you make the mark or not? And that's a hell of a lot more streamlined, and it's a lot less personal than being told by a human that you did something wrong. That's always uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for everybody. It's uncomfortable for the boss. It's uncomfortable for the employee to be told that they're doing something wrong by another human. The system will just do this through the evaluator, and it'll be automatic, and it won't be personal. It'll just be like a computer that just gives you an error message. And it's frustrating, but it's not telling you that you're a bad person, and it's not being delivered to you by another human. It's being delivered by a team of evaluators, or if the system works well enough, an AI system. But that is a revolution in and of itself. That model of operating the entire company based off of the same SOP is new. That's never happened anywhere in the earth that I know of, that every single thing in the company is rendered into a handbook, and then that handbook mutates and evolves over time, has never been done before. It's as far as I can see it, the perfection of a business. And if I could do that, and I could have it run, and I could know it's running, then it would serve as a template and prove its viability. And that's exactly how I want this movement to start. I don't want it to be something that's put on paper and then tried from a top-down method by senators and presidents and oligarchs, in the back smoky cigar smoke-filled rooms of some Machiavellian fucking Illuminati meeting in the back, corner of some obscure, luxurious meeting place. I want it to be an organic, bottom-up movement that proves itself as it goes. And at some point, if it reaches its limits where it can't operate any further, then it just doesn't. Instead of it toppling over and killing everybody below, it just shrinks naturally and doesn't grow any further, and that's fine. or it mutates and it tries some other route, but which would be even better. But the movement is organic then, in that sense, because I've already tested it at the ground level and then built on that and built on that and built on that up, instead of it being from the top penetrating down into the bottom. So it should work, but it makes me a little bit scared because of how effective it will be. There will not really, in all seriousness, in all realism, there is no realistic viable alternative to my economic system of automation, of automating the decisions. It just doesn't have an equal. It is the proper way of doing an economic exchange. So when I do this, I'll be the first person to do it, and it's going to be a worldwide phenomenon, and it's going to be basically inescapable, and people will really feel that as it progresses. It won't be like that in the beginning. In the beginning, it'll be just like every other revolution, starry-eyed and naive, like some 16-year-old girl that just fell in love for the first time. And that's every movement. They all start off as 16-year-old girls that just fell in love for the first time. That's how they all operate. That's the Kierkegaardian passion, the irrational, fuck you, raised fist thing that all the revolutions share. Over time, as this matures, it's going to start becoming daunting. It's going to start getting scary. Managers are going to start looking over their shoulders. CEOs are really going to be shitting their pants. There's going to be people because there are corporate assassins that will come after me, and they'll start looking for me, and they'll start trying to track me down, and I'll actually be in danger, and things like that will start happening. And it won't be able to be stopped. I'm hoping that they'll be smart enough to realize that while this is happening, is that it simply cannot be stopped. It's like a virus. It's infected the world already, and it's just going to keep growing. And the only thing that you can do is you can either adapt to it and accept it, or you can die. And that's it. And when they get to that point and they recognize that, then they're going to start pointing their fingers at not just me, but the entire system itself will have a big, fat skull target on it. You know what I mean? Like, it will be hated. It'll start off as a joke. It'll start off as something like nobody really knows what it is. And then as soon as the oligarchs really dig into what I'm doing and they start seeing what it is that I'm actually doing, then they're going to hate the fuck out of this system. And it will be the worst blight that humanity will ever have looked upon. And it'll just be so fucking dramatic and blah, blah, blah. Because they'll be claiming that I'm selling drugs to children. They'll be claiming that I'm a Nazi. They'll be claiming that I hate women. They'll be claiming that I'm a pedophile. They'll be claiming all the things that are always claimed about all the opposition that always happens nowadays. And I'm hoping that since they've already done that for so long, that no one will care, or that the only people that they'll ever get to garner on their side are going to be people like the far left, far fringe left that no one wants. The Antifa people that beat people over the head with bike locks because they don't believe in having debates. And those people don't scare me at all. In fact, they work in my favor because they're just another example of why my system is better than theirs. Because they don't have a system. They have destruction. They have a warhammer. They don't have a house. They have a sledgehammer. They don't have a plan for the future. They don't have a movement. They have a destructive path. They have a suicidal hatred of everything in existence. And I know because I have been there. I've been in that dark of a place where I hated existence for existing. Not because it didn't exist the way I wanted it to, simply because it existed. I got that hateful. Like, you can get hateful, right? And people do this where they say, everybody except this group sucks, right? That's usually racial supremacy, class supremacy, gender supremacy, political supremacy, religious supremacy. All of these supremacies, right? That's the first gates of hell that you get into. And you say, everything except this is worthless. Everything except that is completely fucking devoid of value. And that's how wars start. And that's how people get oppressed and subjugated and lied to and blah, blah, blah. But it gets worse, because then you've got people that hate even themselves. You've got people that hate even their own systems. And then what do you do from there? Because you've got nihilism to the point where you hate your own movement. You hate your own people. You hate your own values. You hate your own belief structure. You hate your own religion. You hate your own God, blah, blah, blah. You hate to the point where there is no one left unscathed. Everybody is hated. Everybody is on the menu. Everybody is worthless. Everything is stupid. Everything is pointless. There is no fucking point. I should not have ever been born, and neither should you, and neither should anyone. No one should have to suffer the horror, the crime of being. I mean, I've been there, okay? I know what that path leads to. And that's the path where you'll take, where it's like I said, it starts off as being against something. You say that this thing has no value, or these types of people have no value, or this ideological bent has no value. Whatever it is that you think has no value, that's where it starts. That's the opening of the gates of hell, is when you say anything, whatever it is, has no value and shouldn't exist and should never have existed and should just get obliterated. And existence is worse off for it. When you say that, and it's so easy to say, as soon as you say that, you end up allowing hell into your heart, into your life, into your relationships. Everything starts decaying. It darkens the skies. You will be rained on for the rest of your life with acid rain, and it will eat your skin and your flesh, and it will rip them off your bones until you have nothing. And you just get either obliterated, or you finally figure out how to put a fucking umbrella over your head and sit under it and say, my God, thank you for this umbrella. And then you can proceed. You know, you've got your one thing that you do value, and then you start to value more things, and you start to value more things, and you start to value more things, and eventually you can make it all the way back out of that, and you start recognizing that it's not about destroying shit that you hate, it's about protecting things that you love. It's not about attacking the opposition, it's about defending your friends and your family. You see what I'm saying? And they're not the same. That's the thing that gets everybody off track. They opened the gates of hell by thinking that by killing someone, they're saving someone else. That's the thing that always gets them. By committing a crime, by doing something evil, I'm going to have something good happen. It doesn't work that way. The Latin maxim says it best. You cannot commit evil that good may come of it. It just cannot be done. You can't kill someone in order to save someone else. It just doesn't work that way. All you did was just add one more death to the death toll. That's it. There's just one more dead body on the fucking ground. That's the only thing that accomplishes. Killing people just adds more dead bodies. That's all it can do. But what you could do instead is you could save someone's life. You could give someone food. You could give someone shelter. You could give someone clothes. You could give someone hope. Holy shit. You could give someone a reason to exist, to be there with you or with someone else. And grow them instead of shrinking everything else. Grow it. That's what it's all about. That's what this movement at its core should always be about, is creation, not destruction. Building, not tearing down. Empowering, not disempowering or disenfranchising or subjugation or oppression or censorship or lying or cheating or stealing or killing or any of that other shit. And the reason that things are bad and good is, in my opinion, discerned by that line. Are you creating something good, or are you trying to destroy something that's evil? If you try to destroy, the destruction is the evil that you're trying to destroy. The act itself is the thing that you're trying to remove. The act of attempting to remove something from existence is the very thing that you're trying to remove. Because you say, I want to remove this person. Why? Well, because they removed somebody else. Okay, so you're saying they're right. They just picked the wrong target, according to you. Their act was great. They just did it to the wrong guy. So, all you do is you just flip the gun around and you point it at the other person and shoot. Again, it's just one more dead body on the floor. It doesn't solve anything, because then somebody can turn it around on you and say the same exact thing that you told them, they say to you. You say you should kill this person because they killed someone else. Then you kill them. Then you killed that person, so you should be killed by someone else. And then they killed someone, so they should be killed by someone else. And everybody should be dead, and everything is worthless, and everything sucks. And that's where it all leads every single time. So, like I say, it scares me sometimes because it's that simple, it's that inescapable. If you hold hatred in your heart, you will go to hell the end. And it's like, am I at fault for this? Am I somehow causing a problem? Am I causing a rift in the fucking in the matrix here? Am I causing ripples in the matrix? I worry about my impact because of that. I know the rules, but when I enforce them, that's when I'm really, coming up from the audience onto the stage. And that's a completely different feeling. When I'm in the audience, I can't be held responsible for what's happening on stage. It's just happening. What do you want me to do? It's not my show. But if I get up on stage, now it's my show. At least it's in part, it's my show. I'm part of it. I'm part of the show. Well, now I've got to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. And if I don't, then that's going to cost the audience, not just necessarily me, although I would probably pay for it too, but the other players on the stage and the audience and everybody, because of my mistake. An audience member makes a mistake, nobody cares. They're part of the audience. A player makes a mistake on the stage, everybody cares. And so it's a very different feeling. And it really haunts me a lot that I might be doing this the wrong way, or, the inescapability of the system is really what bothers me the most. Because like I said, if you hold hatred in your heart, you're going to hell. Doesn't matter what you do. It's festering in your heart already. It's just going to bleed out into everything that you touch. It's going to turn dark because of that darkness in your soul. If I carry darkness in my soul and I build this white light system with my darkness, am I not just doing the same thing that I told everybody else not to do in some hypocritical way? Am I not just destroying all the evil that I wanted to destroy? And it worries me because it's like, okay, the distinction is that the destruction that might happen to them, that might happen to the Illuminati, the Kim Jong-uns of the world, the destruction that might befall them is not my fault, because all I'm doing is building a good place. I'm not coming after them. And I really have to stress that is, do not attack Kim Jong-un. Do not go kill the Hitlers and Stalins and Maos of the world. Don't kill those people. You let them be. But you give people a free shuttle ride out of there, because they're not going to let them out. Kim Jong-un is not going to let the North Korean people out of his system. There's barbed wire on the fucking fences. It's the only country in the world, I think, that is entirely fenced off and literally physically closed. So if we want to do something about that, the only thing we can do is open up that periphery. And I think that is enough that we can say that we're saving the people without necessarily destroying their system. If the system does implode, that's because people chose to leave. We didn't put them on the bus. We just opened the door. They came in on their own accord. They chose to leave. We just gave them a way out. That's it. We didn't assassinate anybody. We didn't kill anybody. We didn't drop nukes. We didn't target this country and inflict sanctions on the people. No, we just send them a free shuttle bus ride out of there. Go somewhere else if you want, wherever you want to go. This is where the bus is going. You want to get on? Get on. You don't want to get on? Don't get on. And then I'm not making anybody or breaking anybody. It's just people choosing to do whatever they're going to do. And so I have to really say that to myself all the time, because it bothers me. It dogs me. It runs around in my head and causes all kinds of mayhem. And it starts to make me really worry and hate myself, which is where it all starts. It always starts with self-hatred. Anybody that wants to destroy somebody else wanted to destroy themselves first.